Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Mondays with Coach Rice casting the net. We are here this morning. It's a beautiful day outside. So glad to be here. So happy to be with you guys this morning. Some people don't have to work today, but I wanted to come in and I still have to do my show because I love coming on with you guys. So I just want to say welcome to Casting the Net with Coach Rice, where wisdom, faith, transformation intersect. I'm your host, Coach Rice, your professional certified life and mental health coach, trained counselor, speaker, mentor. That just to let you know what I do. But this podcast is really designed to, cast the net of inspiration, encouragement, and practical tools that really help you through you know everyday life, every area of your life. So today I just want to introduce my guest, Ace Aspir Aspiras. Ace Aspiras, author, coach, respiratory therapist. We are definitely gonna dive into his life story. And so, Ace, I want you to tell us about, like where you from and how did you how did your career journey how did your career turn into a journey of a life coach?
Wow. Well, first off, thank you so much for this opportunity. Um, yeah, that's a great question. So I was born in the Philippines, and both my parents were law enforcement. And around the mid '80s, uh, the place where I grew up became a hot spot for cartel. And so
Mm.
my father was on a hit list, and of those people, by the time I turned eight out of those 10 people were murdered. So we essentially flew from the Philippines to
Wow.
California, and that's pretty much where we started. We moved about 8 times in my first 10 years of life. And then we settled in the Bay Area, um, close to San Jose, in a town called Milpitas. And that's kind of where my journey really began. Um, the the transition of being like an immigrant to uh, assimilating wasn't very difficult because I was still very young. Um, but I will say that there were a lot of uh, things that carried over from from back home. Uh, Things such as alcoholism and substance use and things like that from family members. Uh, I come from a really big family. I have 73 first cousins, and
Wow.
we are all over the place. So um, essentially, I played a lot of basketball in high school, all growing up, and let's see, I attended San Jose State University, got my bachelor's degree in business, and then shortly after that, I had a tragedy in my family where uh, a cousin of mine was killed in a car accident. Uh, his brother was driving, and his brother, who was the same exact, like we're like 2 months apart, um, he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and unfortunately, his younger brother passed. So at that moment, the last things I remember my cousin James telling me was "Kuya," which means big brother.
Okay.
Um, I really wish you would have pursued basketball and seen how far you would have gone. And so at that moment, I quit my job. I went back to the Philippines and I made a semi-pro basketball team. Um, about 5 months of training, and when I came back, uh, well, actually, I got injured in my first season, and
Okay.
so at that time, I wasn't a believer yet. I had grown up in the Catholic faith, and there was a lot of just hypocrisy and challenges. I'm not saying that Catholics aren't believers. There's incredible believers in that faith, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus, and so having been adopted by one of the top basketball coaches in the Philippines who was also a believer, I came to know the Lord,
Oh, okay.
and I gave my life up to Christ at um, 24, 24, 25, 25 years old. Yeah. Um, and at that point, uh, I mean, it was just like I was on fire, um, but really just stumbling quite a bit,
Yeah.
like
I
just
know
like
how that can
toddlers,
be in the
right?
beginning, right?
Oh my gosh, it was rough. But the Lord is so faithful. When I came back to the United States, um, I think that was 2008. Um, that was kind of like at the dot-com bust and the big recession, and so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for work. And being Filipino, all my family were pushing me to go be a nurse. And I said, "Oh, I can't do all that. I can't clean those bottoms. No way, not for me." And so they, my cousin suggested, "Hey, why don't you check out, um, something with like kinesiology or anatomy and physiology?" And I got really fascinated with how the brain, lungs, and heart all work together. And so I spoke to a career counselor, and they suggested respiratory therapy. I researched it that night, and the next day I made up my mind to be a respiratory therapist.
Wow.
And so that journey took me to go to school in Los Angeles, um, and that was a lot of fun. It was right after the Lakers won like back-to-back championships with Kobe, so it was a big Laker town, and I was playing a lot of basketball in Venice Beach. But uh, all this being said, I've always been coached, right? Like there's always been somebody in my life that um, has taken time to mentor me,
Okay.
um, and and so fast forward, I'm roughly what 29 years old at this point. I moved back to Northern California near my family's residence, and I practiced respiratory therapy. And that career gave me a lot of opportunities. I'm still a respiratory therapist, but in um, a different kind of facility. But the opportunity gave me a chance to really see things from womb to two,
Okay.
all the
Wow.
perspectives, right? Um, and so we all know what happened with COVID, and
Yes.
if, if if it's all right, I'd like to kind of share that experience
Yes, absolutely.
with your audience. So on February 24th, 2020, I had gone to Kobe and Gigi's funeral at Staples Center.
Okay.
So a lot of grief, a lot of mourning. Um, I fly back to the Bay Area to work my night shift. I clock in, and I'm assigned to the ICU. And that night, I cared for the first community spread COVID patient in the United States.
Wow.
Um, yeah, we found out about 3 days after that night. Um, and so, with all that being said, the challenges of it starting kind of there, right? Like, so to kind of clarify about community spread, it was the patient who they couldn't trace it from Wuhan or from a region that had coronavirus at the time. So it seemed like they were kind of in the dark, right? So the CDC was at my hospital, big pharma, social media, and just a lot of confusion. And what is this thing? So, needless to say, uh, my faith was tested. And at that time, for the next about 20 months, I was slowly, uh, slowly dipping into depression. Uh, I did not know that I had PTSD at that point. Um, but about 4 months in, I started having tremendous anxiety, panic attacks, and flashbacks. Now, it led to uh, December 21st, 2018. I'm sorry, December 21st, 2021, where I had a failed suicide attempt.
Okay.
Um, at that point, I was just over it. I didn't want to live. I had two kids and a pregnant wife, and I didn't want to live. I was just overwhelmed with anxiety. Um, so to not get very graphic, but I did try to swallow a bunch of pills, and when I got by the sink, the Lord made me throw them up, right? And so at that moment, I checked into a mental health facility, and then began my journey of recovery. Um, we relocated to Idaho a month later, January of 22, and then I began uh, my recovery. To this day, I have 2.5 years of sobriety, um, all by the grace of God, 24 hours at a time. And He's God has just given me so many opportunities to be linked up with fellow travelers, and also help people recover out loud, be able to share their testimonies. Because I don't know about you, Coach Rice, there's nothing more powerful to me than hearing someone's story.
Me too.
And
Yeah, you're right. And it's powerful hearing. I'm just in awe of hearing your story and have so many questions because I'm really in awe. I noticed how emotional you kind of. I sensed that you was emotional as you talked about the suicide attempt. Wow, I'm so glad that nothing came of it. Praise God. Um, were you? Did you? Now, were you? Was this before you knew Christ or after?
yeah, so I had been walking with the Lord,
Okay.
um, and I think so during the pandemic. Obviously, there was a lot of confusion and frustration, and having been on the front lines and choosing, uh, due to my conviction, to not get vaccinated, it threw a lot of extra pressure,
Okay.
uh, and so a lot of moral injury. Um, I think there wasn't. I had nothing against people who got vaccinated, right,
Right.
or
Right.
or
Right.
or didn't. It really is one's choice.
Hmm.
Um, however, I was convicted not to, and so paying the price, it really affected my mental health. Um, but hey, the way I have it is, you get to know God on the way up, but you really get to know His character on the way down, and He's just blessed my life so
And
much.
yeah, and I asked that question because a lot of people think that just because you know the Lord, just because you have a relationship with Christ, don't mean you don't go through things, right? And it has
Mm,
nothing to do with your level of faith. It's the level of distress that's on you and how
yes.
you know, that was very traumatic for you to, probably to see what you saw, right? What got you to your wits end? Like at that moment where you like, what were you thinking at the moment when you were like, I just can't do this anymore? And you also you had your family as well, right? And so what was it what was it that was actually so detrimental at that moment that made you see that made you feel so hopeless?
Mm.
Well, actually you already said, but that what did what were you going through when you felt that hopeless feeling?
Mm. So it was so many different things, right? Like you think about your family of origin and their stances, they're them also experiencing a lot of fear and uncertainty, um, and and I think that coupled with a hostile betrayal type of work environment, for choosing not to get vaccinated, right? And so having to make a choice between uh, going to work every day in the face of like an unknown danger and desperately wanting comfort and approval from your family, um, all while dealing with post-traumatic stress, undiagnosed.
Right.
Um, it really brought up a lot of complex trauma, things that I had never dealt with. I did not know what the neuroplasticity was or any of those things at that time. So uh, the last straw for me was a request to attend my brother's wedding, and I only have one brother,
Oh.
and I was vehemently denied that opportunity to go, and it felt personal. It felt like there was. It really felt like there was no escape. There's a bunch of other events that led up to that, but if I was to summarize it, um, even pastors that I'd been working with and talking to um, had advised me to stay away from certain situations, from certain gatherings and groups because of what I was doing for work. Getting spit on at the gas station
Oh my
when you're
goodness.
just trying to fill up, right? So a lot of just things that I've had to process. Um, but yeah, it was just such a dark time.
Yeah.
Felt like the stress of the world was on my shoulders, and all I was doing was blowing up on my family, and I could not control it. Um, it didn't take much to set me over the edge, and I began uh, drinking heavily and also taking prescription drugs, and I just couldn't get out of the loop. So yeah, that's it was a dark time.
You know, I thank you so much for sharing that. I was my brain moves faster than my man's than my heart sometimes when I'm trying to get out things. But you really answered that question very well, even though the question was kind of a little blurry. But thank you, and I love the authenticity of it. Like you know the way you're expressing it, and I thank you so much for sharing that at that level of authenticity because people need to understand you that you can go through a very dark moment, but your testimony is you sitting right here talking about it is a powerful testimony. And so
You,
you had coaches all your life. You went through a you went through turmoil for not taking the vaccination. You went through watching people die in front of you from COVID-19. And you being a first responder, that had to be detrimental. And then you went through then you had alcohol to try to drown it out, right? And you had a family that depended on you as well, even though you was going through all of the things that you were going through. I can see how that can feel very that can be very dark and hopeless. I mean, with no hope at all. Feeling like that. What was the what well after what was the moment that got you out of that dark period?
yeah, I think there were several moments where God just intervened, and I'll say it this way: when I had when I made my first trip, moving some of our stuff up to Idaho,
Mm-hmm.
there were times I wanted to drive up the freeway. I said nobody, and nobody would know. It could look like an accident, and those thoughts of driving off and uh, falling into a ditch and all these things, I I remember distinctly um, making sure that my family would have my life insurance. So I had my policy set up and everything. Um, God was doing incredible work at that time. He, I call it $5 Phillips. And I don't know if you remember back in the day, there were like KFC commercials about $5 Phillips, right? Like little meals just to get you through. And the way I had it was my emotional tank was empty. And then God would have somebody call me and just encourage me, or I'd hear something on the radio, right? Or there'd be like reminders where I'd look to the left and I'd see something that would tell me, no, keep going, you got this. Like I'm with you. And that happened time after time after time after time, and it was just undeniable. There were times where I didn't even know how I made it from point A to point B. Like it was him. I mean, I fell asleep on the wheel several times, and then I'd be right center, and I'm like, how did this happen? Right? Um, I mean, it brings a whole new meaning to like Jesus take the wheel,
Yes.
because literally he
Yes.
took the wheel. Right? So, gosh, there's so many people um, that were used by the Lord intervene for me.
I love
So
how you described it as $5 Phillips. That's perfect. Perfect description of what you were dealing with. Wow. And so, mm, tell me about the journey of you becoming a coach and how did that happen?
uh, so I was a high school varsity assistant coach, and I was a head JV basketball coach at my former high school. And so I've always had it in me um, to try to be the person I needed growing up. And whether it was my brother's friends, there always seemed to be some people who would want to get better, and then the people who would want to get better, uh, those are my people because so am I. And so January 1st of 2024, I released my first book, and I have it here. It's called Triumphing in Truth:
Okay.
Transforming Trials into Testimonies. And I wrote that book based on um, literally a good friend of mine who currently lives in Hawaii now. He said he had a dream that I would write a book. And I said, that's nice. Cool, bro. All right. Well, God's got to bring the people around to help me make that happen. And so it would be one Bible study to another. And it would be like friends that I'd go to lunch with. And they would say the same thing. And all of a sudden, there started to be some momentum. I started getting back into poetry, and using journaling as a creative outlet. Um, and then I was approached to write this book. Now, was I still dealing with my stuff? Yes. Am I still dealing with my stuff? Absolutely. But there's a way to struggle well, and we struggle well with community. We struggle well with accountability, and most importantly, we we struggle well for every step of the journey during transformation requires like a new level, right? So in that new level, um, that's where I love to partner with people, right? Giving them that sense of encouragement, and having them look outside of themselves. Like most of our emotions when we're ready to embark on something new are going to be fear.
Yes.
I mean, it's everything that, gosh, the treasure is in the work that we avoid.
Mm.
So how can we look at that situation or look at that next step on the journey, and really know that it's just a step. It's just a day, right? It's just what can I do today, and how can we build consistency? I don't believe in goals per se. I think they're supposed to be out there, but I think raising our standards, right? Like raising our standards to be able to turn into like the goals are going to be accomplished if we raise our standards. Um, and so, like declarations, I declare myself as being loved, sober, patient, humility, and integrity. I have that on my wall. Look at it every day and try to live by it with God's grace.
So, who is your ideal client?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I was just working with my coach for regarding this, so this is awesome. If he's watching, all right, Bobby, I'm here. um, my ideal client would be somebody ready, somebody who's ready to take the next step. Whatever stage it is in recovery, I think there's something to be said with the D part of post traumatic stress disorder. I think that's something to really explore. Like, do we have disorders or are we just experiencing post traumatic stress? Right? What tools can we integrate? And so the person that I'd love to work with, a couple of my clients right now, I have one in South Africa and I have another one in Orange County. Um, both of them are also like in the mental health field. And so uh, for me, it's people that would like to break out of post traumatic stress, move past the struggles of anxieties with complex PTSD, and really start thriving. Um, because I had the opportunity to write my book and share my testimony, it doesn't have all that power over me anymore, right? Like my struggles don't have that power. So those chains have been broken. But if I'm here to help remove those clasps too and
Right.
help you fly, right? And how we can do that with accountability, um, with love, and also uh, building just amazing systems. And so my clients, I don't know if I answered your question, but it'd be people either that were struggling with addiction, uh, or post traumatic stress, and helping them move towards whatever goal they might have.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Okay. And so, with how do you so with coaching, we are as coaches we have a fine line between counseling and actually coaching, right? And so PTSD can be that's a tough line to not cross, right? How do you not cross that over into the counseling area and when you're dealing with PTSD?
Wow. Well, that's a great question that I should probably ask you. So just a little background. Recently, I just got accepted to Northwest Nazarene University to pursue my master's in social work,
Okay.
and I want to get into clinical mental health counseling and addictions. Um, and so it's all in the work, right? Like, how do you not cross that line? I think the first thing, um, being somebody who's worked in peer support. Uh, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist, but I can suggest certain modalities that have worked for me. I've shared that. So I shared several modalities like timeline therapy and um, EMDR and a few other things in my book, but uh, leave those for the big dogs. And I'm here for accountability. I'm here for mentorship, but I'm actually a fellow traveler because every day I get to put in the work. I get to enjoy the journey. And if I can partner with you, I mean, first off, it's an honor, it's a blessing. Um, but I also love to sprinkle in wisdom that I get from the Bible, reading that every day. So it is very challenging. Um, but I think the biggest thing is staying in your own work, right? Staying in your
Yes.
own work. It's
That
so
that's
it's
so
so it's
true.
so important. I mean, counselors who might not have done their own work are pretty easy to spot. Um, and so I never want to be one of uh, those counselors when my time does come uh, to be a counselor. But right now, I love coaching. I I just
I
absolutely
do
love it.
too. I really do too. And it is tough. I have a master's in marriage and family therapy, but I like coaching. I love coaching. Nothing wrong with being a therapist, but I love coaching better. But I do have to be care. I do it the same way you do. I have to. I really can't take you where I haven't been, and so what I leave the like if it's something that I'm not like PTSD. That's not really something I'm comfortable with coaching on because that's not an area that I've ever experienced. You've experienced it. So you can literally coach and transition. And you also, as a coach, you can walk them along the journey as they see a therapist. That's the beauty of being a coach. Is that
Yes, yes,
you can see them while they see their therapist and be that person, that accountability person. I love it. I love how you do know how to do it, and it's great. That's why I like to bring out the your experience on my podcast because you know how to transition, but you transition in a way of walking them through the journey, and that's what we want to. That's what sets us apart as really good coaches is to be able to do that piece, to be able to walk them through
yes,
the journey and walk alongside of them as they see their therapists in the work that they're
yeah,
doing because like you said there are people therapists that hasn't done the work. It's a different thing when it comes to experience versus actually book knowledge. Me
right.
and my husband was talking about that this morning, the difference between wisdom and knowledge. And so
Yeah, applying it, right?
yeah.
Knowledge and applying it. Yeah,
And so that's all. I love the fact that like you do have that experience and you confident in it, and you sound like a mental health advocate like myself.
right. Yeah, no, I think what's also really cool about being a coach is, having I see a counselor or a therapist weekly, and so when people are on that journey and you can notice that, hey, I think you might need some therapy in these areas because I think you're having an overreaction to something that might still be trapped in there. Um, we all know like how difficult it is to find a good therapist, and I think there's this expectation. Oh, I got to hit it off right away. Oh, that was a waste of time, or you might have gotten paired up through some sort of EAP program, um, and and so it's really challenging to specify what that person might need, and so we can come alongside them and even help them find a solid therapist, or refer them to somebody
Yes,
who does therapy and coaching, and to see it in multiple from multiple perspectives.
you are absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. So, what advice would you give the audience, being that you were a person who've been through and dealt with suicide ideation and attempts? What advice would you give the audience around like how to notice that in their loved ones or friends or even themselves?
It's a great question. I think what happens with post-traumatic stress is that you become kind of a shell of yourself, and one's identity gets wrapped up in who they are at work, what they're supposed to be doing, and um, there begins to be a shame cycle where I blame myself for everything that's going on. Um, and my perspective just gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And then ruminating thoughts start happening, insomnia, um, flashbacks randomly, and blowups that maybe a couple of years before that, or the near past, there weren't those things. So I think it's important to ask a close friend, close family member, hey, have you noticed anything different about me recently? Um, Ask those tough questions. Uh, you might not like what you hear, but getting that person's opinion um, could certainly help one begin their journey of, to recovery. And and so there's a lot of resources out there. Um, I'd love to speak with any of your audience members who might be uh, questioning if they might have some post-traumatic stress. And I think we all deal with some of it, right? But the extreme level um, really begins manifesting internally. Um, for me, I October of uh, 2023, uh, I had to take some time off of work, and about a month and a half after that, we had an incident at work that brought up a lot of memories and things that were essentially complex, like childhood trauma.
Yes.
And and because as men, uh, we're told to suck it up, not cry, move past it, distract, push through.
Mm.
And because of that, all of my trauma started storing into my body. Right, all that stuff was being stored. I was repressing, suppressing. I was just caught up, and so I began having seizures,
Mm.
pseudo seizures, where I'd have twitches in the middle of the night, sweats, like sweating, and gosh, I started having like nerve pain that would radiate from the top of my head all the way down to my legs, and and so the nervous system can only take so much.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, and at that point, I needed professional help, and so kind of going back into the book, I released it January 1st.
Okay.
January 18th, I was in treatment. I was at a trauma recovery center for 40 days. Like it was it was what I needed. So there's no shame in any of in getting help, getting a second opinion, a third opinion, or fourth, or even consulting with somebody regarding one's numbing mechanisms, right? Like, gosh, pornography, alcohol, marijuana, pain medication. Um, watch scrolling on social media all day. I mean, all these things can really negate um, negate our mental health, our mental clarity. Uh, and so, yeah, again, my story, I went into IOP afterwards, in intensive outpatient. And shortly after that, um, God started really, really taking care of me and my family. Um, there was a time that our house was about to be foreclosed, Coach Rice. Like I couldn't pay my mortgage. There were issues with insurance, and frontline healthcare workers not in the state of Idaho, um, not being able to use PTSD as to be able to go use it for workman's comp, right? So
Mm.
I got denied of those things. Um, but I would say the most courageous thing you can do is ask for help.
Yes.
It's the bravest. It is. There is no shame in that, and there are Reese's out there, but they're tricky. And so partnering with somebody who's uh, been through uh, navigating the system, I think would be a great step.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Watching those numbing strategies are huge, and sometimes we ignore them in our loved ones because we so used to them functioning a certain way, right? Or just we. I don't even think our brains want to know if they're actually dealing with something, right? And
Yeah,
but I have my numbing mechanisms that I have to be intentional about coming out of when I feel, because sometimes I can feel a sense of like when I feel if I'm feeling overwhelmed or and I want to escape. I have to be careful with how I escape. Am I escaping to run
mm,
towards Jesus, or am I escaping to run towards a meal? I mean, a good what
right.
do you call that? A good emotional rush, or that's temporary, or am I willing to go to some, you know, alcohol, or do I run to, binge watching something that
Mm,
ultimately is going to leave me empty at the end, and
mm,
it's going to exacerbate what I'm going through. And so I have
right.
to make a decision and be intentional about the decision. But you're right. We do not. I love the question that it's good to ask, because we see ourselves every day where we can say, ask our loved ones, have you noticed anything different about me? That right there is, I like that because it's so simple, right? And especially with a lot of stuff that's going on today with, transition, a lot of transitions happening right now. And I think it's important that our audience know that we have to have community. We have to
Have to.
be we have to have accountability. We have to have care. We have to have the love. We have to have support. We really do need to check in with and say,
Absolutely.
have you seen anything different about me? And just having that conversation, and you know confronting our loved ones when we see something different.
Hey. Yeah, I'm writing something really quickly here, um, that I saw on YouTube, and I think this to me is like summarize what it is to have community, right? Like when we have community, first off, in my first year of sobriety, I wanted to quit 84 times. I don't know why I kept track of the number, but I wanted to quit 84 times. And at 84 times, I had a list of 5 people that I would call, and somebody would call me back,
Okay.
right? Or pick up. And it didn't matter what time of day, what time of night, they would. And so how you can't go through a transformation process alone. I really think
No, you can't.
it's impossible. Um, not saying that God can't get you through certain steps, because He absolutely does. But having that mentor, somebody who's actually gone through it, can just make things a lot easier because they see things we don't see.
And you know what? And
Um,
he put us. That's why I say you went through what you went through. I went through what I went through, but we didn't go through it for no reason. It didn't happen.
right,
It didn't happen to us. It happened for us, but it also happened for the next person.
right, yeah. And in Second Corinthians 1 verse 4, God comforts us in our affliction,
Yes.
so that when others are faced with any affliction, we can comfort them the same way God comforted us, right? And that's really what it's all about, like retreating back to our Heavenly Father. Um, and if we have issues with our earthly father, that can kind of sometimes skew what we think or what I thought God could do for me.
Right.
But gosh, he's so faithful, and he's so loving and patient. He's just so good.
Yes. Without
Um, but what
limitations.
I right? So when we're by ourselves, when it's just we have illness,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we 90% of autoimmune diseases are because of stress. And but together, uh, regardless of how deep of a valley we're in, uh, God's there with us. But together, we
Yes.
have wellness.
Yes.
So
I
anyway,
like
that's
that.
kind of corny,
No, it ain't.
but
No, it's no, it's not corny at all. Visuals are great. People remember those. They, just to say the words, it'll flow fast. But to write it down and people see visuals are powerful. Um, but yeah, that's amazing. So I'm just grateful and so in awe of God of what He did in your life, especially when it comes to suicide, because a lot of people don't talk about suicide and they're afraid to talk about suicide, but it's real. We
it's
all
real.
subject to have those thoughts when distress gets so heavy and shame gets so overwhelming, and we hide. I always say anything hidden can't be healed. So when we
Right?
hide, I hid so much in my life that when I made a decision not to do it anymore, it changed my life. And sometimes that behavior pops back up where I want to hide,
Right?
but because I
Me
feel
too.
like who do I have to talk to, and especially when you deal with like lack of trust, right? And so it's kind of hard sometimes to say the things you want to say to and but you have to because they have to come out. The more
Have
like
to.
mistakes I make and they come out, the more growth I experience.
Come on, that's the other side, right? I mean,
Right, the more growth I experience. That's
yeah. The further you go down, uh, to what they call the rock bottom. I used to think that word was just like made up, like okay, it's a place, it's a spot, and I felt like I was stuck at rock bottom. But literally, when one does, for example, like the 12 steps, and says that, um, I have no control over my addiction, right? Like I
powerless. Yeah.
absolutely powerless, and I'm ready for my higher power. That's what they use in AA, to come alongside me, right? And I think that moment right there is literally it's like a rocket launch. It's like a springboard. Like I'm
Yeah.
actually finally done, and I can launch from here. And it's going to be bumpy on the way up, but hey, if on some days during my early recovery, if the only thing I did well that day was to stay sober, that's a win. And
Yes.
and and we just stack days, stack experiences, um, and know that God is God is using every experience just to sanctify us, to be more
Yes.
like Jesus.
Yes.
Um, it's just I'm just so grateful. Um,
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. With I can literally talk to you for hours, but I'm not gonna do that.
Thank you so much.
But I'm gonna respect the time, but I really truly want to thank you, Ace, for sharing your story. I do have your information in the comments and your links, and just just for people to connect and with you, because you do virtual, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so for people to connect with you and get the help they need as well. It's so amazing to see. I love to see coaches who actually care, because we have a mental health crisis, and the therapists and the counselors need our help to help with the in the with the patient clients being in the system inundated, waiting when they don't have to wait. They can get a coach. That's what we're here for. We're here to help the mental health care field so that we can do what we need to do, right? And so sorry, I have my husband in the office with me, and that's what he's talking and not even
Awesome.
realizing probably I'm still on. But I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on today, sharing your story. And I would love to, you always welcome to come on anytime. You just book the appointment, and
Thank you so much.
you can come and share stories, your story, your history. There's so many questions I could have asked, but I wanted to make sure I
Likewise.
keep it focused on the what we were talking about. But you have overcome so many things in your life, and you're here today, and you still doing the work. I have a therapist I talk to too. I love it. I love that I have one. I love that I go get the help I need, because if I didn't, I would be, and I wouldn't be able to grow. I wouldn't be able to be where I'm at today. So I have people, mentors, and people who I could say, yes, you really did. You helped me out. So I just want to say to the audience, if you need someone to help you, please reach out. Do not suffer in silence, and please do not let shame hold you back. If you're dealing with something, go get some help. And if you don't connect with a therapist right away, don't be discouraged. It means that you just have to pick someone that's a fit for you. But go get some help, no matter what. Talk to someone and get the help you need, because you matter in this world. You are unique, you are valuable, and don't ever forget that. And so I just want to say, definitely reach out to us if you need the help you need. And we just want to thank you for listening. If you felt like this episode could help someone else, please do share, because we would like for you, to know that your mental health and well-being matters to us. And so all the links are in the comment section. Are in the description. And please reach out, check out his book. You may like it. It may be helpful for you, and reach out to him if you need him. Like I said, we're here to help. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Ace, for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Last thing I want to leave your audience with: practice transmutation. So certain negative words or stigmas, such as PTSD, we can create new meanings out of it.
Yes.
So post-traumatic stress disorder can be something completely different. So when I start feeling the anxiety, when I start feeling the shakes and trembles, God's telling me that I need to PTSD right back at it. And the way we do that is to P, pause and pray. T, to trust our Lord, trust our Savior. Look back at everything that He has done. You have made it through 100% of everything you've experienced. S is to seek wisdom, seek discernment, seek help if you need it. There ain't nothing wrong with that. And lastly, D, declare victory. You have the victory in Christ. He's done it. You're here. You're watching this. Thank you so much.
Amen. Drop the mic.
Hey, hey.
Thank you so